this is a very important moment. Will the Labour front bench actually be putting down an amendment for a referendum and then vote for it?
I think it's more likely that it'll come from the backbench because almost every victory we've had...
Will Labour back it then?
Yes. Almost every victory we've had on anything in the last 3 years has come from the backbenches. That's how we got the meaningful vote. That's how we got any progress in this.
Right, so Labour will be equipped to back a second referendum vote next week.
Andrew, we've already voted, I think, 3 times as a party for a second referendum with a 3-line whip behind it. And that is the clear policy. Whether it's this deal or any future deal, it's got to go back so the public can say, do you want to leave on these terms? If so, then we do. If not, we remain.
Good day, everyone. If you thought the British political landscape was already a chaotic game of 3-dimensional chess played in a hurricane, hold on to your hats. We are currently staring down the barrel of a proposal so audacious, so divisive, and so spectacularly bonkers that it makes a lettuce outlasting a Prime Minister look like a slow news day. Imagine, if you will, Sir Keir Starmer waking up tomorrow morning, looking in the mirror and deciding that what the United Kingdom really needs right now in the middle of a global cost of living crisis and soaring geopolitical tensions is to rip the scab off the biggest political wound in modern British history. We are talking about a snap Brexit referendum. Yes, you heard that correctly. The ghost of 2016 is being summoned from the depths of the New Statesman's Instagram feed, and the fallout could be enough to end the Starmer era before the ink on his EU reset bill is even dry. Quick favour, if you're loving this, hit that subscribe button. Over 92% of viewers haven't yet. It's free. Takes a second and means the world to us. Thanks if you did. Now back to the show. Let us dive straight into the heart of the madness. Tom McTague, the editor-in-chief of The New Statesman, a publication that is essentially the house journal for the pro-European intelligentsia, has floated a theory that is currently setting the internet on fire. He suggests that if Starmer were to call a snap referendum on rejoining the European Union tomorrow, the public would likely vote to go back in. The justification? To defend ourselves from what he calls reckless Trump and reckless Vladimir Putin. McTague argues that the vast majority of the Labour Party and its MPs already believe Brexit was a historic blunder. He paints a picture of a country so exhausted by global instability that it would go sprinting back into the arms of Brussels just for a bit of quiet. But here is the kicker. He suggests a 7-week timeline. 7 weeks! In British politics, 7 weeks is barely enough time for the Home Office to lose a passport, let alone for the entire nation to decide its constitutional future. It is a proposal that is either a stroke of genius or a terminal case of wishful thinking. Think of it like trying to build a cathedral out of matchbox cars during a gale. It is technically a structure, but one sneeze from Nigel Farage and the whole thing is coming down. As you can imagine, the British public, never known for their shy and retiring nature, had some thoughts on X, formerly Twitter. The reaction was a delightful cocktail of disbelief and mockery. One user summed it up perfectly, calling it bonkers, and reminding everyone that the original vote was 10 years ago. Let it go, they pleaded, pointing out that there is zero democratic mandate for such a move, and that 7 weeks is nowhere near enough time to even choose the font for the ballot papers, let alone pass the legislation through a divided parliament. It is like trying to organise a royal wedding in the time it takes to boil a kettle. You might get the tea, but the guests are going to be remarkably confused. Another user pointed out the sheer political stupidity of the idea. Why not do something that would immediately unite a divided right and remind every Leave voter why they voted against Labour in 2019? Genius. It is a fair point. If Starmer wanted to hand Nigel Farage and the Reform UK Party a golden ticket back to the front lines of relevance, a snap referendum would be the perfect way to do it. It is like trying to put out a fire with a bucket of petrol while wearing an asbestos suit that is 2 sizes too small. The Reform Party would not just be back, they would be leading the parade. But wait, the plot thickens. One particularly creative ex-user suggested that Starmer does not even need a referendum. They argued that he should simply rejoin the EU as a matter of national emergency. Now that is a spicy take. Can you imagine the scenes at the cenotaph? The Prime Minister standing on the steps of Downing Street declaring that the great British sovereignty experiment is being cancelled because of a security crisis in Eastern Europe or a trade spat with Washington. While it sounds like the opening scene of a dystopian thriller, it highlights the desperation of the rejoin camp in 2026. They see the polling, which currently shows around 53% to 56% of Britons would support rejoining in some polls, and they want action now. But in the world of Westminster, emergency rejoin is about as likely as the Speaker of the House of Commons performing a stand-up comedy routine in the middle of Prime Minister's questions. It ignores the fundamental reality that Brexit was a populist movement, and you cannot simply administrative error your way out of a populist mandate without causing a riot in every Wetherspoons from Penzance to Perth. Why now? Why is the New Statesman pushing this narrative in January 2026? It all comes back to the global stage. With Donald Trump back in the White House and Vladimir Putin continuing his aggression in Ukraine, the security argument for EU membership is being dusted off and polished. Pro-Europeans argue that a lone Britain is a vulnerable Britain, a tiny island caught between an unpredictable American Golden Dome and a hungry Russian bear. McTague's theory relies on the idea that fear of the outside world will trump the desire for domestic sovereignty. It is a gamble on the national psyche. Do we feel more like a proud, independent trading nation or a scared child looking for a seat at the big table in Brussels? In 2016, Project Fear failed to convince the British public because the threats felt theoretical. In 2026, with trade wars looming and energy prices swinging like a mood ring in a disco, the fear is much more tangible. But is it enough to make people forget the Take Back Control slogan that won the day a decade ago? Or is this just another case of the metropolitan elite misreading the room while sipping oat lattes in North London?
The deal is in the national interest. That's what the public want. That's what they were promised. The outstanding issues are not difficult. They can be resolved. Let's get the deal. Let's move on and focus on the job in hand, which is dealing with this pandemic.
While McTague thinks the Labour Party is united on rejoining, the reality on the ground is much messier. Starmer is currently facing a quiet rebellion from within his own ranks over his EU reset bill. While some centrist MPs are pushing for a return to the customs union, arguing it would add 1% to GDP almost overnight, others are terrified of reopening the Brexit can of worms. They remember 2019, they remember losing the Red Wall. They know that even if the polls say people regret Brexit, that doesn't mean they want another 3 years of constitutional warfare. Starmer has spent the last year trying to make Brexit work by aligning with EU rules on food safety and security without actually rejoining the single market. It is a boring Brexit strategy, a slow, methodical drift back toward Europe, like a glacier moving towards a warmer sea. McTague's snap referendum would blow that strategy to smithereens. It would force Starmer to choose a side, and in doing so, it would alienate either his base or the moderate voters he needs to stay in power. It is a political landmine with a very short fuse, and Starmer is currently wearing very heavy boots. Let us look at the numbers because that is where the real drama lies. Recent polls from YouGov and Delta Poll show a consistent lead for the rejoin camp, sometimes as high as 20 points. However, there is a massive catch. When you ask those same people if they want another referendum now, the numbers plummet. It turns out the British public is like someone who has just gone through a messy divorce. They might regret leaving, but they are absolutely not ready to go through the court case all over again. This is the polling paradox. People want the benefits of the EU, the easy travel, the lower food prices, the feeling of belonging, but they are allergic to the process of getting them back. Starmer knows this. He knows that calling a referendum is not just asking a question, it is launching a war. And after the last few years of political turmoil, the British public has about as much appetite for another Remain versus Leave battle as they do for a lukewarm cup of tea in a rainstorm. It is a recipe for disaster. We cannot talk about Starmer's dilemma without talking about the 2019 general election. That was the year the Red Wall crumbled because voters felt Labour was trying to overturn the 2016 results. Many of those voters returned to Labour in 2024, but their trust is fragile. If Starmer suddenly pivots to a snap referendum, he is essentially telling those voters, we didn't listen then and we're not listening now. It would be the ultimate stupid move. It would validate every criticism the Conservatives and Reform have ever made about him being a flip-flopper or a closet Remainer. It would unite the right in a way that nothing else could. Imagine a coalition of Kemi Badenoch's Conservatives and Nigel Farage Reform, all campaigning on a platform of defending the people's will. It would be a landslide for the right, and Starmer would be the man who handed them the keys to Downing Street. It is political suicide with a smile. Starmer's entire brand is built on being the grown-up in the room. He is the man of process, the man of rules, the man who doesn't do wild politics. Calling a snap referendum to rejoin the EU in 7 weeks is the polar opposite of that brand. It is a move that reeks of desperation and panic, two things a Prime Minister should never show. If he follows McTague's advice, he is effectively admitting that his EU reset is failing. He is admitting that he cannot fix the economy or the security situation through traditional diplomacy and needs a Hail Mary pass to save his premiership. But in politics, Hail Marys usually end up out of bounds. The grown-up move is to stay the course, however boring and slow it may be. The stupid move is to gamble the country's future on a poll that could go either way.
I don't think it's straightforward. I think it's probably right for him that he thinks long and hard about it. But I think for everybody in the Labour Party, we need this to be resolved pretty quickly. And I suspect Andy will be thinking very long and hard about what's the right thing for him and what's right for the Labour Party. If Andy runs, he can't be both the MP and the Mayor of Greater Manchester. I know you've explained that to listeners today, but he's legally banned from doing both.
The core of the argument for rejoining, especially the emergency rejoin theory, is that Britain needs to trade sovereignty for security. With Trump threatening tariffs and Putin threatening borders, the argument is that we are too small to survive alone. But this is exactly what the Leavers warned about. The idea that the EU is a cage we have to stay in for our own protection. If Starmer uses national emergency as a pretext to bypass the public, he is stepping into a sovereignty trap. He would be proving that the UK is no longer a fully sovereign nation capable of making its own decisions. It would be a surrender, not a strategy. And for a country that prides itself on its independent spirit, that is a very hard sell. It is like telling a teenager they can stay out late, but only if they wear a GPS tracker and call their mum every 20 minutes. It is not freedom, it is supervised living. Finally, we have to ask the big question: would rejoining actually solve the problems McTague thinks it will? While rejoining the single market would undoubtedly help trade, it wouldn't magically lower energy prices or stop global inflation. It wouldn't stop Putin's tanks or Trump's tweets. In fact, it might make things worse in the short term, as the UK would likely have to join the euro and lose control over its interest rates, something that would make the Bank of England very nervous indeed. The idea that rejoining is a silver bullet for Britain's woes is a fantasy. It is a complex multi-year process that would involve years of negotiations with 27 other countries, all of whom would want their own pound of flesh. By the time we actually got back in, the national emergency might be over, but the domestic political damage would be permanent. It is a classic case of the cure being worse than the disease. If Sir Keir Starmer actually takes the bait and follows the New Statesman's advice, he might find that his days in number 10 are indeed numbered. Reopening the Brexit debate is like playing Jenga with the British Constitution. One wrong move and the whole thing comes crashing down on your head. The public might be frustrated with the results of Brexit, but that does not mean they are ready for another people's vote circus. For now, the snap referendum remains a fever dream of the left-leaning media, a bonkers idea that serves as a stark reminder of how divided the United Kingdom still is, 10 years after the original vote. The path forward for Starmer is clear. Keep your head down, fix the plumbing, and for heaven's sake, do not mention the B word. Thank you for watching.